What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Trench Warfare Film Room. I'm your host, Brandon Thorne, and today I wanted to do a quick show, just sort of a condensed film room on a prospect that I believe is going to be rising throughout the process, and that is Georgia left tackle Monroe Freeling. I'm sure you've probably heard his name if you're listening to this at this point, if you're just kind of getting into the draft. I leave for the combine next week, and I'm just kind of finishing up everything, kind of just touching up my grades and my scouting reports, making sure that I feel good about everything going into the combine. You could read our latest big board on Bleacher Report. We did a top 225 recently, and Monroe Freeling is one of the few tackles I think really in this class who could feasibly become a full time, long time, multiple contract starter at tackle. There always is just a handful of guys per draft. So, but in this class in particular, it's just not a great tackle class necessarily. Everybody you could kind of poke holes in to some extent. So that works out well for a guy like Freeling. He has a really interesting profile. He's a one-year starter. He started a couple games in 2024, but primarily, this past season was his first year as a full-time starter. And that brings with it some concerns just in terms of, and some obvious things, just in terms of his rawness. And that's stuff that you see on the film. I saw a comparison, Lance Zierlein from NFL.com compared him to Broderick Jones, who was another one-year starter from Georgia, left tackle. So, I mean, I get the similarities there. Their profile is similar, but I see a little bit more fluidity from Freeling. However, there are some concerns with his balance. He tends to get overextended, push-pulled, and he's on the ground quite a bit on his film, especially early this season. However, that did improve as the year went on. And I think that's key with a guy like this in particular. It depends on when you watch him, right? And fortunately, I have access to all the film for college, so I'm able to kind of pick and choose where I want to watch. And, obviously going to the best competition is always a priority. And I think also watching guys sequentially helps. For me, that's something that I typically try and do. So early in the year, best competition, middle of the year, end of the year, try to get 4 or 5 games for every single guy. And Freeling, I'm on 6 or 7 now. I just keep watching him because I want to see if some of the things that I've written down and written in the scouting report that's up now on Bleacher Report are really truly consistent throughout the year, good and bad. So yeah, he's been a guy who's grown on me, I think, throughout the process, especially as I think about this class and what it has to offer or lack thereof at tackles. So yeah, I mean, I definitely see a path where he could become a starter within a year or two and sustain that for a while. And he has the tools, though, that certainly look like a multiple contract starting tackle in the NFL. So he's 6'7", 315, 22 years old, or about to turn 22 in July. So he's young, inexperienced, green in a lot of ways, but you saw the linear progression I felt like this year, especially the last few games. And we're only going to look at 5 reps right here from his 2025 season because I believe these are the reps that really signify why people are going to be excited about him the more that they dig in, and maybe why he could turn some heads at the combine, why he's probably going to test pretty well, things like that. But really, it comes down to pass protection for a tackle. And these are the best clips that I saw from him this season. And all of these except one are from the last Ole Miss game of the year. So they played Ole Miss twice this season, once in the playoff, which we're going to watch here. So a couple reps here we're going to watch against Prince Will Human Malin, who Prince Lee was his brother from Ole Miss, who got drafted by the Panthers last year. This is his younger brother, who now I believe just transferred to LSU. There's a couple clips here, and then a couple clips against another edge rusher from Ole Miss. So let's just watch how fluid he is in his movement, particularly at the top of the drop. his ability to play with good posture. So we'll play it a couple times here. The quarterback is definitely, catching, drifting over to the left just a little bit and getting rid of it quickly. So of course that helps any offensive lineman, doesn't have to protect that long. So I think that's a piece to kind of pay attention to. But the rusher right here is going to go with just a speed chop, right? And he accesses that edge. He captures that outside arm right here. He actually gets it around Freeland's, but Freeland is very fluid in how he redirects when guys get on his edges and pass protection. It's not perfect, but he definitely has those reps where you sit up in your chair and you're like, okay, that looks like a guy who could get himself out of some compromising positions, especially in the NFL, and carrying 315 the way he does, with his sort of size and dimensions, and then being able to move and recover as he does. I believe everything else, is secondary to that in some sense. I think as a drive run blocker is really where he's weakest. He could get manipulated, push pulled, and overextended and not sustained super well there. But this right here in pass protection, just getting that outside hand back right there, you could see resetting and then just mirroring up the arc and then being able to stop quickly, balanced, in good positional leverage, head out of the block, all that sort of stuff. That, and you started to see more of this as the year went on. There was glimpses of it throughout this season, but this last game of his college career really, I think, was probably the best one I watched. So of course that's always good, for a young player in particular. So here's another one going 45 to vertical, times his hands well. Does punch down the middle a little bit right here, but he catches the rusher right in the throat, jolts his head back right there, and then he's smooth, right? The rusher tries to counter inside at the top of the drop, and he's right there all over it. He's able to stop, start, redirect quickly. And then I love he turns it into a drive block right there, which you could see as the ball's released right there. That transition into a drive block at the top is just a sign that he's in full control. So another good rep there. I like the timing of his hands here. Quarterback, bails and then the rusher breaks off. So I think at that point it's, kind of a not really what you should pay attention to here. I think this is a winning rep for sure. I think this the timing and the placement of his hands for one, but watch his base because he initially drops that outside foot thinking that the rusher's going to go high side, but he's actually trying to counter across his face. So watch his lower half here adapt to that. And that's very quick, smooth, gets into his anchor, creates force, and anchors down as he jumps, right? And he's very firm. So he won the rep, and then the quarterback bails. So he gets slipped late there. But the point from his 45-degree set, getting to his spot, connecting firmly with the hands, initially dropping that outside foot, but then quickly resetting his base and then immediately playing strong. That's a really good sign, I think, as well. So this one, he's in a bad position here. This is earlier in the year. It's against Texas, but just little stuff like this. He's against basically, five technique, loose five technique, and you can see he drifts. He drifts, he oversets. He's in a bad position right here. Inside shoulder soft, and the rusher is counter swipe ripping across his face. But watch his feet and watch him adapt to that to pinch that off. And he forces the rusher to execute a late outside spin there. This right here, again, for a guy who's bigger like him, who's very kind of broadly built and, has good length and size and all that, to be able to move your feet and have a loose enough lower half, hips, feet to recover like this, I just think is a good sign, because I do think it would be rocky if he is inserted into a lineup right away as a rookie next year, considering some of the concerns I have with his ability to sustain in the run game. And it really comes down, especially at tackle, you can't really bank on a lot of guys being a sure thing as a rookie in particular. It's pretty rare. So you're really trying to identify tools and traits and hopefully more than flashes, but some things that you could really bank on that could be developed. And, he is kind of a blank canvas in some sense, but he has really there's a really good structure to what he offers in terms of his physical traits and some of the movement abilities. So that's really what you're trying to bank on, with Freeling, and I see the vision. It just comes down to, of course, where you're going to value that. I have right now a 7.6 on him, which on our grading scale is like a late second round grade. Tackle tax, I think, is a very real thing. And especially, after the combine, I think, the buzz will be even higher on him. And, assuming the interviews are good, of course, that's a huge piece of this as well, and his capacity for development. But assuming that is at least decent, you could probably talk yourself into high second, late first, similar to the Broderick Jones thing, right? He got drafted in late first, I believe. So, I mean, that's been rocky. And, he had to switch positions in Pittsburgh. And I don't want to equate him to Freeling too much aside from, Georgia 1 year starter left tackle. But yeah, I just wanted to do this to just provide a glimpse into kind of what I see with him and why I have kind of warmed up to him as opposed to, early on in the year when I put an initial grade on him and things like that. So yeah, he's going to be a really interesting player to kind of track throughout this process and, throughout his whole pro career, which I hopefully will be able to do. But yeah, tools, movement skills at tackle in the NFL as a prospect, that's good enough to go in the first couple rounds. So I would assume he's probably going to check those boxes for most teams, and we're going to see him drafted, pretty high. Hopefully, you guys enjoy this. I'm going to be doing some more of these. Like I said, I leave for the combine next week. I leave on Wednesday. And then after that, I'll get my free agency rankings going and have that out to you shortly after as well. So, yeah, exciting time of the calendar. I appreciate you guys' support. It means a lot, and I'm looking forward to tracking the next wave of offensive linemen.